All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hockey fans, and other design beats making you not ride from my train of thought. We got one final NHL Power Rankings to get to. As I said last week, next week is going to be basically an abbreviated version of the rankings and then Stanley Cup playoff predictions. I will do a bracket challenge. I will share the links with next week's video. Anyway, let's get to business with this week's video. And as always, we're going to start with the Eurostar Zombie Tier. Vancouver, 8 home wins. That's all they got this season. It's the only team in hockey with less than 10 home wins. It is not great. The Canucks continue to struggle, of course. Obviously, they will have the best odds at the first overall pick in Gavin McKenna, which would be quite big for them considering how brutal it has been for the Canucks this season and really, honestly, for the last couple of years and maybe since the bubble. The Canucks, at best, will have 9 home wins this year. They have one more home game left. They've got a road trip coming up this week. But obviously, the Canucks' damage is done, and needless to say, they will lead off the abbreviated power rankings next week. Chicago, things aren't working. Yeah, they've got the future star and current star in Connor Bedard, but as we've seen with the Blackhawks, not much else. And Chicago, what do you even do now? How do you even kind of sort of rebuild and kind of sort of get it right? You've had high draft picks for the last few years, not just Bedard, but the last couple of years, and you've seemingly gone nowhere fast. What do you even do next? And how do you even try to move forward? Calgary, decent at home. Unlike other Canadian teams, if you will, the Calgary Flames are actually respectable at home. The problem is their road record is no bueno, and probably why the Flames will go no further than the 82 games allotted to them in the NHL's regular season. The Flames are another team that needs a franchise changer and needs something ASAP. They seemingly have a lot of solid number 2, number 3 pieces on their team, and obviously a really good goalie in Dustin Wolf, but it just feels like there's something missing. They just need that high-end number 1 guy, as a lot of teams do currently, honestly. Can Calgary find that guy in what's going to be a pretty good draft, McKenna or otherwise? New York Rangers, kids are improving. I will give the Rangers a whole lot of credit. They could have mailed it in and packed it in, and at times it felt like they did. But to the Rangers' credit, they actually played really well over the weekend. Their kids put up a bunch of goals against the Capitals and the Red Wings, respectively. I wish Jonathan Quick would have had a shutout on Saturday. And they were absolutely destroying fools over the weekend and getting 4 points. Unnecessary points, but points. One of their rookies had a hat trick, and the rookies have played generally well for a lot of this season. Got to give Edmonton the Rangers their credit there. They're actually winning currently 3-2 over a good Sabres team. Obviously, Buffalo will be entitled here, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, the Rangers are a team that's also been self-destructing really quickly. Theirs is just a very quick, abbreviated version of what Vancouver did. Well, with a President's Trophy added in. Seattle, quad deuces. Seattle has cratered and fast and hard, and like I said last week, it feels like they need a number 1 guy, and they clearly do not have one. But why quad deuces, you ask? Well, Seattle has lost 4 straight games. In all 4 of these games, they've scored exactly 2 goals. You can see the quad deuces now. If ever there were a team that needed, and maybe was a signature piece away, a superstar away from potentially getting back in the playoff contention in this zombie tier, it might be these guys. Or maybe the Rangers consider they still have a lot of high-end vets and the rookies are playing well. But Seattle is in some real trouble here, I would imagine, in terms of direction. What do you do with Shane Wright? What do you do with Theodore? What do you do with the guys you have? You have decent goaltending in Grubauer, but what do you do, Seattle? Florida, Pittsburgh wins twice. So the Panthers' disaster zone season, or gap year as I've called it, is almost over, mercifully. And maybe the Panthers can steal the lottery and steal Gavin McKenna and infuriate everybody. Basically be this decade's Edmonton in terms of lottery luck. And, or I guess the Spurs of the late 90s before they got Tim Duncan. And perhaps they could be that. But for Florida, they had 2 games against the Penguins last week, or going into the weekend, and they lost them by a combined score of 14-6, which is Not great for football. The Dolphins lost to the Steelers this past season. That's not great for me as a Dolphins fan. But this happened to the Panthers, and their gap year continues. At least there was also a game against the Canadiens they lost, but at least that one went to a shootout. Good on you with the Panthers. At least their season's almost over. They've got some games left against some playoff caliber teams or teams that need them to make the playoffs. Florida, your reign of Stanley Cup champions is almost truly up. Just a couple more games to go and your gap year can end. Then you can get healthy and you'll probably be Stanley Cup contenders once again. You're probably the NBA's equivalent, the NHL's equivalent of the Indiana Pacers, to be honest. Toronto, mixed triangular bag. So a lot of teams have had some California triangular trips over the last few weeks. I talked about the Flyers and how they swept. I talked about how the Sabres and how they won 2 out of 3. Toronto had a bit of a mixed bag. Last week I talked about their game with Anaheim and their fight night, where they actually won and defended the honor of their captain, Austin Matthews. They also had their games against San Jose and against the LA Kings, where the San Jose game was not really all that competitive. The Sharks kind of put in work and dominated them. And then the game with the LA Kings was pretty much an LA Kings special. I'll explain later when I get to the Kings portion of this. And they did the 6-7 thing. Well, losing by that score in overtime. Not great, considering they probably should have won it with William Nylander, and instead an odd-man rush counter buried the puck in their own net. It was not great. The Maple Leaf season of disaster is almost over, and I would normally say this is the part where at least the Blue Jays exist, but they had an awful time against the Dodgers, and I guess the Raptors are in play. I guess there's that. Anyway, Toronto's got some decisions to make. Brad Treliving got fired last week, and they've got some moves to make and to figure out, okay, who's going to be next up as their GM, and what kind of direction, for that matter, are they going to go into? They still have to survive the draft lottery in the sense of their pick may go to Boston. And if they don't have to give up their pick to Boston this year, they could lose that pick to Boston or to the Flyers. This could be a rough couple of years for the Maple Leafs if they don't figure out something fast. And St. Louis, similar to Toronto. As I mentioned about the Californian Triangle, and I just talked about with Toronto going 1-1-1, where they lost in overtime to the Kings, where they beat the Ducks, and they lost to the Sharks in regulation. Guess what St. Louis did? Not exactly the same order, but the same exact results here. They went to Anaheim and took care of business. They, before that, played the Kings in overtime, and they ended up losing in OT. And before that, they played the Sharks, and they ended up losing that game in regulation. Word for word, bar for bar, blue jerseys, you get the idea. One team won the Stanley Cup recently, and the other one, well, hasn't. But anyway, we're not talking about that right now. But what we're talking about is how St. Louis, even with all of that, are still kind of sort of alive in the playoff race. It's not by much, but the Blues at least still have a pulse when it comes to the Western Conference because of how mediocre that conference is outside of the Central Division 3. St. Louis does deserve some credit, though. 6-3-1 in the last 10 is pretty good. The problem is it feels like they're not making up much of any ground whatsoever in terms of getting to the last wildcard spot. It feels like they're going to run out of time, and they're going to be cooked like their style of ribs. Fun fact, I do like their style, and most styles of ribs, by the way. St. Louis probably is going to go to the draft lottery and end up with a relatively high pick, I'd imagine. At which point, maybe they can find a new star. Anyway, let's go to the UK Pacer Monkeys Paul Tier. New Jersey, Hischier, clock starts. He's got a year left on his contract, and the New Jersey captain was quoted as saying, "We'll see what happens when we get there." And it's understandable considering what happened previously, that what preempted these comments, where Tom Fitzgerald was fired as the general manager of the New Jersey Devils last week. And to be honest, the Devils have been a bit of a disaster class for the last couple of years, you could say. Pretty much since they beat the Rangers a few years ago in the playoffs, they haven't really been quite right since. That's been kind of unfortunate on their end. They looked pretty awful last night against the Flyers, and they looked like they were really cooked after giving up 2 goals early, and then 2 goals again early to another different person. to go into the second period. It was pretty much a wrap, and it was basically a home game at the Prudential Center last night up in Jersey. The Devils probably need a reset and reset fast. The question is, aside from the Hughes brothers and probably Heischer, because Heischer is still a very good player, what do you do now? What do the Devils do and go? Where do they go from here, to be honest? San Jose, now or never. You're somehow still alive, as most Western Conference teams are still relatively alive in the playoffs. You got a stretch where you can make some hay. The question is, can you actually make said hay? Tonight is the most important game of your season so far. You got Edmonton in short order. And from there, what do you do? Can you deal with Anaheim, who's after that? And then can you deal with, there's a Canucks game, which is pretty much a free space on a checkerboard. And then Nashville, Chicago, another free space. And then Winnipeg, who, if Winnipeg gets hot, who knows, maybe that's a playoff spot at stake. Can San Jose get it together and get it back together in time to make the postseason? Can they get the help that they need, too? That'd also be necessary. It's a shame that they don't get there, because Macklin Celebrini is a tremendous player. I like watching him do what he does. He can ball out. He needs the help, though. Nashville, a horrible draw. Nashville's schedule down the stretch is absolutely barbaric. And considering they're only a point ahead of the Kings, who beat them in their last game, well, their next to last game, in overtime last weekend, they're going to have to survive everything that's coming their way. And obviously, if they win out, they're in the playoffs. But this is getting kind of ridiculous. What kind of draw am I talking about? Well, their last game, they shut out Anaheim, which is a very good look considering they needed to do that. Coming up for them next, the team directly ahead of them, the Utah Mammoth. More on them later. And then there's the Wild. At least that game's at home. And then there's the Sharks. At least that game's at home. And then there's Anaheim again. At least that game's at home. So yes, tomorrow is their final road game. And fortunately for them, they got the 3 straight home games in front of their Predator, in front of their crowd, in front of their audience. And in theory, if Nashville wins out, they're fine. Can they, though? Can they survive this gauntlet and even get 3 out of 4? They could be good. Either way, it's a really good run, considering this team looked dead about a month ago, and they found their way back and found their way to this spot here, where they're 4 games away from the playoffs. Good luck, Nashville. You're going to need all of it. Winnipeg, time's running out. Like I said for Nashville, it's the clock is ticking. And for Winnipeg, they have got some hurdles to jump through. Down 4 points, and compared to everyone else, they are either even or a game in hand. Nashville's got 1 less game. Same with the Sharks. They're even in terms of games with the Kings and the Mammoth, though the Mammoth should be all right. There's a lot to go through with Winnipeg. And I think it's going to be a little bit too hard for them to get into this postseason. That's what it feels like, to be honest, for these Jets. They, too, have been pretty solid over the last 10. They've figured it out. And 6-3-1 is a pretty good look. They've won 2 straight. The problem is the West is so jammed that the playoff portion of it, the wild card portion of it, is just incredibly hard for them to make up any ground, or for anyone to make up any ground, to be quite honest. Winnipeg, good luck. You're going to need all the help and a lot of teams cratering to get into this dance. LA, saved by overtime. Kings, in regulation, have a combined 19 wins in 60 minutes of hockey play. Kind of wild when you think about it. It explains all the overtime points. They get a lot of them, and they have literally not played a game this month that has not gone to at least OT. Insane, I know, but true. We still got a few games left. I wonder if the Kings can go the rest of this month without playing a game in that only gets to regulation and ends there. I wonder if that's the case. And for LA, they have some monster games. They have a game with the Canucks, which you would imagine they could win in regulation. I would like to think so. And then there's Edmonton, monster game, Seattle, and then another free space with the Kings and a potential free space with the Flames. So the Kings' schedule down the stretch is actually pretty good. In theory, they're going to be able to win some games in 60 minutes, right? As opposed to 65 or a shootout. I guess we'll see. Anaheim, bad timing. A horrible time for the Ducks to get ice cold and start to really take L's and unfortunately go on a horrible losing streak. Right when Vegas and Edmonton, we're on both of those teams later, are pretty much stable and getting it together and have usurped them for a division that Anaheim has held pretty much hostage for about 2 months up until this. It's not great for a Ducks team that looked like they were turning a corner to the playoffs, and it may turn the corner into being a second or third seed in the Pacific Division. Can Anaheim get it together and get their momentum back? If they don't, it's going to be a problem. And they may go out because of the way Edmonton and or Vegas are playing. Detroit, devastating week. The good news is they played the Flyers last Thursday and got the job done. They won this game. They looked like they were losing momentum after a goal that made it a one-score game, and they immediately got the goal back. Okay, cool. They won in the place they don't normally win in Xfinity Mobile Arena. But since then, it's gone ugly and awfully ugly fast. They got nuked by the Rangers, not what's going on in the Middle East, but they got nuked by the Rangers, and then they had a horrible loss against the Wild where they completely blew what should have been a win. And then they had a situation that should have also been a win against Columbus, and it didn't go down that way. They blew that game also in the final minutes. Yikes. And then lost in the shootout at least. They got a point there at the very least. But a horrible time for Detroit to take that L, and then it would seem like they are going to miss the playoffs once again, which begs the question, what do you do now? Where do they go from here? I guess it's something that we'll need to have answered in the offseason if the Red Wings don't make the playoffs. They'll be playing for their season against a white-hot Flyers team coming up tomorrow night. We'll see if they can salvage the series of games in round 3, where both teams have won the road games this month against each other. And Washington, is Obi done? And it may mean overall, it may mean in the NHL. Will Obi go to the KHL? It feels like the Capitals are going to run out of time when it comes to actually making the postseason, which is disappointing considering at times they look good. It just feels like they're going to come up short in an Eastern Conference that has suddenly gotten incredibly competitive, and an Eastern Conference that absolutely looks like it's going to take a good 95 and maybe even more points than that to get into the postseason, to be honest. Washington has played respectable hockey down the stretch. They're another one of these 6-3-1 type of teams, and they're probably going to be 7-2 or something like that after beating the Maple Leafs. They're currently at 3-0 on Toronto. It's going to be quite the shame if Alexander Ovechkin's career in the NHL effectively ends here, and it ends with a whimper as opposed to a bang. Even still, the Hall of Fame will obviously come calling, and any and all honors that the Capitals are going to give him, effectively he can rule the city of DC if he wanted to, and would signify the end of a golden age, if you will, for Capitals hockey, where in most years Alex Ovechkin were healthy and everything was rolling, the Capitals were a threat. And it's just weird to see them not really as one this year, despite Alexander Ovechkin playing truly very well, to be honest. It's kind of surprising. We're going to go take the California Zephyr to playoff tier. Vegas. Gamble playing off. So far, the John Tortorella hire has worked, and the Golden Knights are rounding into shape just like we all didn't want them to. They've won 4 straight. They look like they're getting their act together. They're relatively healthy going into the postseason. And as we've learned from the Golden Knights, they're either going out in round 1 or they're making a deep run most years. Only once have they gone out in round 2. And it's to the Oilers last year. But aside from that, they have gone either into the conference finals or they're out round 1 whenever they make the postseason. Conference finals, I say minimum. Imagine Vegas could absolutely get back there. Do they have the high-end power to deal with God mode that is Connor McDavid and anyone else in the Central? If they get that far, I guess we'll see. New York Islanders, the Vegas route. They, like Vegas, have fired their head coach deep into the game and are trying to get that spark that is desperately needed. For the Islanders, it's been a bit of a mixed bag, unlike Vegas. They fired Patrick Waugh and moved forward with known very good playoff coach Peter DeBoer. It's just a frustrating success or failure at times when it comes to his teams over the years, especially in San Jose. Unlike Vegas, they've kind of gone the antithesis route, as in they've lost 4 straight, and are suddenly cratering themselves out of the playoffs. They haven't played since Saturday, though, so maybe they'll get their act together for a crucial game against the Maple Leafs. And then 3 monster games. They got a gauntlet of an ending to their schedule. Can they figure it out and get it back in time to save themselves? It'd be a shame because Matthew Shafler has had a tremendous rookie year and will more than likely win the Calder because he has been a brilliant defenseman and as advertised as the first overall pick that he was. He's only second in points behind Matt Barzal on the team. That's incredibly impressive. But the Islanders got to move, and they got to move quick to save their season. Edmonton, McDavid, Bouchard, and that's going to be the problem I'm going to have when it comes to the playoffs for the Oilers. Yes, Connor McDavid will carry. Yes, Evan Bouchard will do his thing. And in theory, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins will do his thing. Okay, understood. I'm just wondering about the high-end scoring. As we've seen with Edmonton, after McDavid and Draisaitl over the years in the playoffs, the scoring has been kind of a mixed bag. And I'm a little concerned that when we get to the postseason for the Oilers, that there's going to be a little bit of lacking. Unless McDavid just goes absurd and sets everyone up for beautiful feeds and or does wizardry, because he's capable of that. It's just a matter of, is it going to be enough this time? And will the loss of Draisaitl actually catch up? I guess that's going to be the question. They've lost 2 straight, sure. They have a game, crucial game, with San Jose coming up soon. It'll be going on as I'm editing this recording. I do wonder if Edmonton's going to be able to keep this division lead away from Vegas, or at least widen it. They're currently tied with the Golden Knights. I do wonder if they're going to be able to actually keep this lead away and get the luxury of dealing with one of the wildcard teams in a kind of mediocre wildcard situation. Who knows? Maybe they'll get the Kings again, because of course they might. Utah, powered by Zammoth. Have you seen the greatest Zamboni machine ever created? Look at this thing. Look at this monstrosity that Utah has created. It looks awesome. It looks incredibly sleek. I love the eyes as headlights. It is a beautiful, glorious design. And I've seen the mock-ups for other teams having Zamboni machines. Let's not do this unless you have something incredibly cool like this. This is S-tier level creativity by the Mammoth. I love what you're doing. I love this. Continue to renovate your arena and make it hockey-like. And why do I say they're powered by Zammoth? Well, the Mammoth have become one of the hottest teams in the game. They have gone super hot right now and are looking like a playoff team. They've won 4 straight. They are cooking right now. Never mind the S-tier Zamboni machine. And they had that great win against Edmonton last night. They get a showdown with Nashville as they try to make the playoffs for the first time since moving to Salt Lake City. I'm here for this. I want to see more of the Zammoth make the playoffs. Utah, even if you go out in 5, okay, cool, fine, whatever. Don't care. Just make the playoffs. I want to see more of that Zamboni machine. It is awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. Great work. Columbus stole last night. Did you watch the game between Columbus and Detroit last night? It was absolutely entertaining and completely insane as both squads went bar for bar and back and forth. And it felt like at the very end of it, as Columbus was relentless and Detroit was icing the puck, it felt like Detroit was going to win this game and kind of help save themselves and really take Columbus down even further, as they have been sluggish over the last couple of weeks, ever since their unstoppable run through February. Instead, they give up the goal they somehow steal a point at the end of regulation. They get to overtime and they swipe the other point away from Detroit in what would be a devastating loss for the Red Wings and potentially season-saving win for the Blue Jackets. And so much so that Columbus, though they wouldn't make the playoffs as it currently stands, they are not dead yet and are pretty much a game away from making them now. They're only 2 points behind Ottawa and 2 points behind the Flyers for either the last spot in the Metro or the last spot in the playoffs proper. Can Columbus do that, though? Can Columbus find a way back in? They were super hot for a lot of February and March, and they have really cooled off lately. 3-6-1 in the last 10. Can Columbus figure it out? It won't be easy. Their last 4 games left: Buffalo on the road, Montreal also on the road, and the 2 home games, one with Boston and one with Washington. The first 3 that might not be great. It's a horrible draw. And in Washington, we'll see if Washington's got anything to play for. And it may be for OV's last game, so you know they're going to do everything in their power to win it. It's a horrible draw for Columbus and a team that got cold at the wrong time, and they may just run out of gas. It's a shame, too, because Zach Werenski has been excellent this season. Had it not been for Cale Makar, he might be your Norris Trophy winner because he's had a brilliant season. But Cale Makar exists, so he'll probably end up finishing second. Boston, kind of concerning. As I've talked about with Columbus going cold, the Bruins are even colder. They've lost 4 straight, and sure, 2 of them are a back-to-back situation of going to Tampa Bay Saturday night and then having to fly to Philly Sunday afternoon. Sure, you can put that in there. But even with all of that, they still had some time, at least a day, to play Carolina, and at least that game went to overtime like the Flyer game, and it took an L. And before all this, I just mentioned, they had a game with the Panthers and lost the other side of the Floridian battles. Like I've mentioned with all these other teams left, they've got some gauntlet games, some serious games. The NHL really cooked with the end of the season schedule with a lot of these teams. And in their case, Tampa, Columbus, and at least New Jersey, sure, fine. But the problem is they only have 3 games as opposed to a lot of these other teams have 4 or 5. Boston should be okay. They should make the playoffs. But if they lose 7 straight, that's going to be a whole lot harder to justify them making it. Ottawa. Very impressive week. Ottawa, I mentioned last week, had a gauntlet to deal with. Ottawa passed with flying colors. Let me explain. So Ottawa, this past week, had to deal with Buffalo. They won 4-1. Now, sure, that score inverted against Minnesota. Okay, fine. But then they doubled up on the Hurricanes 6-3, and then they went Maybach Flow 6-2 over the Lightning. Very good work there. So 3 out of 4 against 4 really good teams, all of which with 100 points. Ottawa won 3 of them. Hey, can't knock that. That's beautiful stuff by the Senators, who needed to stay on pace with a lot of these other teams in the Eastern Conference. Ottawa has put themselves in a real good spot. And down the stretch, they've got Florida, who in theory they should handle. And then that's the other half of the whole Floridian situation they got going on there. And then you got the Islanders, the Devils, and the Maple Leafs to close it out. The Islanders who are cratering, and the Devils and Maple Leafs who are bad. So, in theory, Ottawa should make it. The key word is should. Can Ottawa keep up this run of form? I would like to think they will. And Pittsburgh. Panthers and peace. Why the peace? They haven't played since the Panthers. Why the Panthers? They went back-to-back against Florida and handled both games, getting all 4 points. Can't knock that. Can't deny that. Pittsburgh looks like they're in real good shape to hold on to the second spot in the Metro, considering how the Flyers are white hot, but the Flyers probably are going to run out of time when it comes to catching them. They have done a very good job of really just playing stable hockey, especially without Crosby and Malkin. And now that Crosby and Malkin are back, looks like they're rounding into form nicely. Good on Pittsburgh for holding it together. They won 9-4 and then 5-2, like I said, against Florida. And now their end of season schedule is actually really easy compared to everyone else I've just mentioned here. They got the Devils and then a home and home with Alexander Ovechkin. And it may be the last time we see OV versus Crosby in both arenas. I'm glad we're getting it at the very end here. And then they get the Blues to close it out, which may be very important for St. Louis, but I guess we'll see. Pittsburgh looks like they're probably going to have the second seed in the Metro, which, yeah, Carolina has basically run circles around everybody else in the division. Second, third, fourth, and fifth, all very competitive. We'll see if Pittsburgh can hold this spot together. I would think they should, consider their schedule is far weaker than everybody else I've mentioned so far. And now we're going to go to the VSOE title tier. Philadelphia, Porter Matone's arrival. He has been as advertised and has looked incredible and a perfect fit for a Philly team that needed scoring and they needed shooting. They also needed people to get healthy, as in Tyson Forrester, another guy who likes to shoot first and ask questions later. He has been very good lately. The scoring has been generally awesome from the Flyers lately, and they have gotten it from pretty much everyone who is willing to shoot all of a sudden. And Trevor Zegras looks great. Owen Tippett looked great. The goaltending by Daniel Vladar has been pretty sturdy and steady and at times excellent all season. Can't deny that. It's been tremendous work by a Flyer team that's been scorching hot lately. They have now earned their way back into the postseason, and are in the 3 seed obviously the Metro, after what's been a tremendous run of form. Can the Flyers hold it together? For Philly, it won't be easy, however. They're going to have a showdown with Detroit in a game where I think Detroit's pretty much fighting for their season tomorrow night in Motown. Winnipeg, okay, sure, also fighting for the season, but Connor Hellebuck, who's the best goalie on the planet, more than likely. And then Carolina and Montreal, who should have things locked up, especially the Hurricanes. But at least both those games are at home. 4 crucial games. In theory, if the Flyers get 3 of them, they're making the playoffs. Can the Flyers keep this run of form up and possibly set up another showdown with Pittsburgh in the Battle of Pennsylvania for the 5th time in the last 16 years? That is also very well in play, and I think most of hockey world would love to see it. I would. Minnesota, playoff preview tomorrow. I have mentioned many times during these power rankings, I want Minnesota versus Dallas. I got to have it. The former North Stars who moved to Texas versus Lil Bro, as in the Minnesota Wild, in a series I'm sure Wild fans have wanted to have and wanted to see for many years. Unfortunately for them, it's only round 1 and not round 3, but I think they will take it, and I think they will run with it. I'm here for it. I need it. I got to have it. And it's crucial simply because the game could determine who is hosting game 1 of said series. Both teams have clinched playoff spots, obviously, but we don't know if that game 1's going to be in Minnesota or in Dallas. Same as Minnesota. Like I said, I need this showdown. I want it. I got to have it. Both teams have played each other recently at various points and have played tremendous hockey against each other. I need this showdown to go down in the playoffs. So far, it is Wild 2-1, as they have played each other 3 times thus far. Minnesota won the last one in overtime. So we've got, in a sense, you could say, Dallas has won 1-1 against Minnesota. All right, bet. Let's see this showdown tomorrow night. It's at 9 o'clock. It's probably appointment viewing for most of us who like hockey. This showdown in Dallas could very well be a preview of what's going to come next week when these 2 teams inevitably face off once again, because they're going to be 2 and 3 in their division. It's just a matter of where we go here. Let's go to work. I need it. I got to have it. We're getting it. Let's go. Tampa Bay, Florida's only hope. So every year this decade, a Floridian team has represented the Eastern Conference in the Stanley Cup Final. We saw the Lightning do it in 2020 in the bubble. I actually did that clinching game, ironically, against the Stars, and Tampa Bay won that game. I did Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final against Montreal, and though Tampa Bay did not win that game, they won the Cup the very next, a couple of nights later, to win their 2nd Cup in a calendar year. They did go back in 2022, but Colorado put an end to their dynastic-style run and got their Cup there. And then the Florida Panthers took over with the next 3. As in, they went to the finals against the Golden Knights for 23, obviously getting gentlemen swept, and then won the next 2 against the Oilers and handling their business there, 1-7, 1-6. That is the standard of excellence that the new state of hockey, that is Florida, has set over this decade. Can Tampa Bay keep it going? And there's no real guarantee that they're actually going to be hosting Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs in their building in Amalie. That's a pretty wild thing to say, but it's the truth, considering they're in a 3-way deadlock with the Sabres and the Canadiens. I will talk about them momentarily, both those teams. And the only thing that's separating them is regulation wins. Tampa Bay's 2nd in that. But they've lost 2 straight. Can Tampa Bay keep it together and get it back on track? And they've got a monster showdown coming up, just Tampa Bay, with the aforementioned Canadiens. That's tomorrow. That's going to be incredibly crucial and might determine who hosts in either portion of the Atlantic Division route. Speaking of this Atlantic Division, that's a gauntlet, and Montreal, they're next. Playoff arbiters. Now, this is only part 1 of the Canadiens' run of potentially determining who gets where in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, they've been scorching hot. This should also be mentioned. They've won 9 of 10 and have been absolutely ridiculous. The only loss in this is somehow a 3-0 loss to the Devils. I don't quite understand how that happened, but it happened. Anyway, other than that, that's their only blemish in the last 10, and they really have been a very productive, solid team for the last, entire season, to be honest. And Montreal could be the playoff arbiters and determine the fates of several teams here. As I mentioned, they get Tampa Bay tomorrow, and they host that game. But then they also host Columbus, a team that's got to have it. And then they also host the Island. They also go to Long Island and the Islanders. They got to have it. And then the Flyers to close out their season. You got to get the idea. The point of it is Montreal can determine the fates of 4 different teams. As well as their own. Montreal maybe wins 3 of these games. They may even win their division. But to do so, they're also going to have to deal with Buffalo. Drought is over. The longest drought in professional sports, at least the 4 major ones, when it comes to making the playoffs, has officially ended. Side note, kind of weird to be a Buffalonian, I would say. In the NFL, you had the longest drought in professional sports with the Bills until the Tyler Boyd play. And then in the NHL, you had such a thing with the Sabres until last Saturday when the Rangers beat the Red Wings and they ended up giving the Sabres a playoff spot. And since then, if you looked at Buffalo's Twitter, they have released a bunch of different videos commemorating this celebration and occasion. Buffalo is holding on by a thread, if you will, when it comes to this playoff party. They, as I kind of misspoke, they actually are 2 points ahead of both Tampa Bay and Montreal for the Atlantic Division lead. But if they are all tied, currently speaking, the Sabres have the tiebreaker. They have regulation win stuff at 40 compared to 39 for Tampa Bay, 32 Montreal. So there's that to worry about. When it comes to Buffalo, however, it's really, I think their fan base is just going to be so excited to see them back in this dance. They actually won tonight against the Rangers. That's why the extra win is in play here. That's why they just got the extra 2 points. Their last games left, they only have 3 of them. Columbus, I got to have it, and boy, did Columbus get the short end of the stick there with their schedule. Chicago, which feels like a free win, and then Dallas. And we'll see what Dallas is going to need if they need this game at all. Well, it's kind of a reminder they're facing the Stars as their last non-playoff game before going to the playoffs. If you know, you know. Buffalo could very well be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, too. The catch with that is not in their division, but it's with Carolina, East top seed. For now, that's where the Hurricanes currently are. They have locked up their division, and they effectively had it locked up a month ago because they're the only ones in their division that stayed steady, stable, and dominant pretty much the entire way through. Everybody else has had a really rough run of form for various reasons, whether it be injury or just bad play, or in the case of the Red Wings, the inability to hold on to a lead. But we ain't talking about that right now. What we're talking about is Carolina and how they have storm surged their way to the top of the Metro Division and have stayed that way. And it feels like for a lot of these rankings, they've been 7-3 in their last 10, 8-2 in their last 10, 9-1 run, something like that. Like they've kind of just stormed through and run through against everybody in front of them without much problem. Carolina should be fine when it comes to their seeding in theory. They get Chicago, and then they don't have any home games left, to be honest. They have a 4-game road trip before they host Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs against one of the 2 wildcard teams. If they can get out of Chicago, Utah, Philadelphia, and New York Islanders, with, I would say, 6 of a possible 8 points, they probably are your 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Or at least they'll be able to keep it in theory. I'll obviously be able to update this next week. But Colorado will remain number 1. President's Trophy winner. It's not official yet, but we're pretty much there. They've already locked up number 1 in the Western Conference, the number 1 seed there, and it's not going to take much more time for the Avalanche to lock up number 1 overall in the NHL and just hoist their President's Trophy banner. As I mentioned with Tampa, they obviously have one of those Stanley Cups against the Floridian teams, and with their squad fully healthy and really ready to go once again, and potentially dealing with another showdown with the Dallas Stars in round 2, the Avalanche are ready to go and ready to roll here. Sure, they've had their random losses. They lost to Vancouver, as I did last week's version of these power rankings. It was kind of weird. They lost to St. Louis this past weekend. Kind of weird. But they also do have that statement win against Dallas where they shut him out, which is a thing. They may also be a little bit of a playoff arbiter for 3 of their 4 games. What do they have left, Colorado? They host Vegas, and they go to Edmonton. 2 monster games which could determine the Pacific. Then there's Calgary, which could be a free win if Colorado really tries, and then Seattle, who probably is not going to make the playoffs, as I previously mentioned. Colorado's in real good shape, and as long as they are fully healthy to go into the playoffs and ready to roll with Nate McKinnon, who in theory probably wins another Hart Trophy, they are going to be good to go. And then obviously Kel McCarr winning the Norris. And by this time next week, Colorado will have some really cool hype video preparing for another trip to the Stanley Cup playoffs and potentially even further than that. So there you have it. These are the final formal NHL Power Rankings. Like I said, next week will be about predicting the Stanley Cup playoffs. That will come out next Friday, as we will have all these seedings and everything else locked in a bow. And maybe Thursday if everything is wrapped up by then. So that obviously will require me to pay attention to what's going down on Wednesday and Thursday night. The East will pretty much settle all their family business on Wednesday. And that may be what I need before I can do the power rankings properly for next week. Coming up later this week, more than likely Friday, NBA Power Rankings, the final version of the basketball version of this. And the NBA playoff predictions, I will do them with the play-in, or I will do a play-in video separately from all the other stuff. So I'll try to decide that, and I'll have a formal decision during Miami Mock Mondays on Monday. So look out for that as well. Either way, NBA playoff power rankings are coming up next, and Washington, you're going to be the first stop of my next train of thought.